they wanted to learn the basics, how to steer the plane, how to take off, but not land. Now, would that be a red flag to you? Welcome, everyone, to this special edition of Inside the Cockpit here on Queen City News Plus. May K. Beeler here. I'll be joined with Alicia Barnes. Reflecting back, it's been 24 years since terrorists used commercial planes as weapons of mass destruction. Did you know that the pilots involved in those terrorist attacks learned to fly here in the United States? And so many changes came after that. Changes in flight training, changes in security, changes in the way all of us fly. And Alicia Barnes joins us now to talk about this. Alicia is my seatmate in the newsroom. We talk about things all the time. Yeah. And it's just kind of a heavy day, heavy hearts to think of all the losses that came out of 9/11. What were you doing that day? Do you remember?
Well, I definitely remember. I was on the phone with my sorority sister. I was in college. I was at Wayne State University studying for my master's program. And she said, Alicia, I think the Twin Towers are coming down. And we turned on the news, watched it. And just looking at the images that you just showed, May-Kay, right there, 24 years later, just as you said, it's hard to feel that so much time has passed, but those images and what happened that day, it's in your heart forever. For all of us who are adults or even if you were a teenager and you knew, seeing people jumping out of buildings, seeing the images, the firefighters rushing to the scene, hearing the stories of survival, hearing the stories of people trying to help out. It was an incredible, incredible time, I feel like, in our country.
And so much has changed since then, our flying experience. So as a flight instructor, I'm here to talk about how flight training has changed, because did you know, Alicia, that those pilot hijackers, and they had muscle hijackers, these were the guys that were accompanying the pilots who were there to subdue the passengers, subdue the flight crew. They were there with the muscle. But they were specially trained pilot hijackers as well, one on each of the 4 flights. There were 19 men total. Most of them were the muscle hijackers. The others were the pilots. They learned to fly in the United States. Does that surprise you?
I remember learning about that. I mean, I was surprised of how easy it was for them to be able to take the training. And I'm interested to find out in the 24 years, what has changed?
A lot has changed, because I was a flight instructor starting in 1990, so before 2001. And things changed, and I eventually became a chief flight instructor of a flight school at Piedmont-Triad International Airport. There's so many rules and regulations we have to go by. So, Alicia, back in the day, pretty much anybody could walk into a flight school if you had the money.
Okay.
If you had a wad of cash, I want to learn to fly. Well, there was no reason to think you had any malintention. We weren't going to do a background check. There was no reason for that. There was no reason to ask, well, really, what's your motivation to learn to fly? Because we didn't suspect that you could possibly be a terrorist for Al-Qaeda.
Right.
So those gentlemen walked into different flight schools, Florida, Minnesota, California, Arizona. And from reports, many of them paid in cash. So they walked in with the cash. From reports, although some finished all of their finished most of their flight training, some of them just verbalized they wanted to learn the basics, how to steer the plane, how to take off, but not land. Now, would that be a red flag to you?
Now.
Yeah.
But I can remember even how you go through airport security now is different.
And we'll talk about that.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like, so now when you think about somebody saying, this is all I want to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be a red flag.
But people that have a lot of money would even go to a flight simulator. Simulators are very expensive, not the type you have on your computer at home.
Right.
But if you were to go to an airline simulator or a place that, it costs thousands, and these simulators cost millions of dollars. But back in the day, rich people would go just for fun. Well, I have a lot of money. Hey, let's go rent a simulator for the day. And they did that. So there was a report that one of the hijackers had $10,000 cash, took a wad of cash, and went to a simulator and said, hey, I just want to fly the simulator. I just want to learn how to steer. And they took the cash. Because back then, like you said, then, there was no reason. All right, so how have things changed? In this day and age, Alicia, if you wanted to learn to fly and you came to me as a flight instructor, or you came to my flight school. I want to learn to fly. First thing I want to see is proof of citizenship.
Okay.
I might take you on a discovery flight first, and you don't need any ID or anything special for that, because you're just going to go and kind of do the basics for a 30-minute flight. That's not enough to teach you how to take off or land a plane. So you're coming in and you want to learn to fly. I need to see your passport, please, or your birth certificate, proof of citizenship. Once you give that to me, I do what's called the TSA, Transportation Security Administration, sign-off in your logbook or in my paperwork and in my logbook. So I know that you are a citizen. Well, let's say you're not a citizen. Then you have to go through all of this paperwork. And the TSA has come up with a flight training security program for non-U.S. citizens and nationals. Got to get all this information on you. So we do a background check, and the TSA does that as part of a program. So we just
before somebody can say, "Hey, yes, I can give you to come in here." All this
yes,
happens.
you can come in, and I can talk to you and interview, tell them how much it's all going to cost with the program. But I can't take you flying in the airplane
until this happens.
Until this is approved, and it can take many weeks to get this approved. So basically, they're going to do fingerprints and a background check on you to make sure you don't have a seedy background. Make sure you're not on a no-fly list. That there's nothing suspicious about you. So you can't just walk in and take your first flight. I have to determine, are you a citizen or not? If you're not, we have to go through all this paperwork. And the TSA has to vet you. Now, just so you know, as an American citizen, I've got your birth certificate or your passport. I have proof of your citizenship.
Excuse me.
You can go fly with me and we can start flight training. But to get a student pilot certificate, and we fill out the paperwork for that, the TSA will vet you before they give you a student pilot certificate. So anyway, things are much harder now than they were. Back in the day, you just needed money.
Right.
And flight schools need money. So you come in with a wad of cash. Oh, yeah, we'll teach you how to fly.
At what point, though, now that it's been 24 years since 9/11 happened, did you as a flight instructor start seeing changes? Was it immediate? Was it a couple years after, or was it like maybe, oh, wow, hey, there's a lot of things in place that we need to change, and that's now been more recent?
It took a while. I mean, I've been a flight instructor for a long time. It really wasn't until I was a chief flight instructor of a flight school, and I'm in charge of all of that to make sure everything is in order. There's a lot of paperwork. And that was probably, I started that 10 years ago, and I've been a flight instructor since 1990. So we were slow to see all the changes with that, but mostly a lot of paperwork. We have to know who you are and why you want to do this. Plus, in addition to that, the flight instructor themselves, the flight school, anybody who works at the flight school, even if you work the front desk, hi, welcome to our flight school, blah, blah, blah. Anybody that comes in contact with the customers has to take a TSA security training course, an initial course and recurrent training. Because even though you're not teaching them to fly, you're dealing with them, and you need to know what the signs are to look for.
Have you had anybody cross your path that you said, you know what?
I have, and it was an American citizen. And actually, he already had a pilot certificate. So for all of this vetting to occur, once a foreign national or a non-U.S. citizen gets approved for initial flight training, which would be a private pilot certificate, if they go on and want to learn how to fly a multi-engine aircraft or get an instrument rating, and so obviously if you were to fly an airliner, you would have a multi-engine rating, they would have to go through vetting again. I had a guy come to our flight school who had his own plane, and he just wanted access to secure areas because I had a badge, we're badged, we're in secure areas and where the public can't go. And he kept wanting to go in those areas. How do I get one of those badges, Mickey? I want one of those. Well, you don't work here. You're not going to get one. And then he'd start asking my flight students, how do I get one of those badges Mickey has? Weird and red flag.
So much to talk about, Mickey.
Yeah, I think we need to take a break.
Okay.
And we'll be back when Inside the Cockpit continues. Stay with us. Welcome back, everyone, to this special edition of Inside the Cockpit. May K. Beeler here, joined by Alicia Barnes, just talking about all the changes that took place since 9/11. Alicia, I don't know how old you are, and I'm not going to ask. Do you remember that back in the day, you didn't need an ID or a boarding pass to go to the gate?
Okay.
Did you know that?
I don't remember that.
Okay,
Yeah,
she's young.
because I always thought there was some part of screening. Like I always thought you had to give an ID, and even before 9/11, to me, I thought we always had TSA. You know?
No, TSA was born after 9/11. We'll talk
Okay.
about that in a minute. But there was a time you didn't need a boarding pass or an ID to go to the gate.
Wow.
So your loved ones went with you. Mom and dad went with me, and they walked me to the gate.
Mm-hmm.
See ya when I come back from college or whatever.
I do remember that because I can remember my grandparents would take me when I was younger. I guess my parents would take me to the airport, and they would come to the actual door, but they weren't leaving to go on the flight because I was flying to meet my grandparents.
Right.
That was back then when kids would fly in the airplane. I don't think that's safe anymore by themselves. But
well, back then there was security, but it was very lax compared to what it is today. The airlines handled their own security, or they had private contractors, and you would go through a simple metal detector. Mm-hmm. So let me tell you about the hijackers. So 4 different airports, 4 different groups of hijackers. There were 19 men total. They all went through security with no questions. Now, one of them or 2 of them were scrutinized and held back just for a minute to make sure that their checked baggage was held until they got on the plane. Because back then, internationally, there were some terrorists who would put a bomb in their suitcase. It would go on the plane. They never got on the plane.
Gotcha.
Okay, so they were held back slightly, but they were allowed to get on the plane. Now, according to reports, when they went through the basic metal detector, I don't know how good the metal detector was, they had box cutters, they had knives, and concealed weapons. So they carried them right with them on the plane.
So clearly the metal detectors weren't very good.
Right.
I mean, clearly when you could go through a whole bunch of stuff.
I don't even know how that was possible. And that was on their carry-ons.
I mean, now when you have a bobby pin in your hair, they stop you.
They stop you.
I mean, which you're thankful because you're just like, when they check you and you check all, even these gold bracelets that I wear all the time, if you can't take something off, then they wand you and you go through a whole body scanner.
Right.
That was not happening back then.
No, it was very simple. So once the attack started on 9/11, the FAA decided, whoa, we don't know what's going on here. We're going to ground all planes immediately. Everybody in the air was ordered to land at the first or the closest suitable airport. Not going to have you land on a grass strip. You're a big airliner. So this is the first time in the history of the United States that the airspace was closed on purpose. All right, so close to civilian aircraft, military didn't count. That was a different thing. So everybody landed. They grounded everybody for about 2 or 3 days, and after that, very few Americans were comfortable flying.
Yeah,
I don't think I'm going to do that. So that's when the Department of Homeland Security, was born, and then they gave birth to the Transportation Security Administration, and they beefed up security. And this started, Alicia, with National Guard at the airports, with police officers, and they checked everything. Now, 100% of bags, carry-on and check bags, had to be searched. And now there's a prohibited item list of things you can and cannot take. So we know today you cannot carry on a knife or a gun or any type of weapon.
Even an aerosol.
Right, even an aerosol. Now, you can check it in your bag as long as you let the airline know. But you can't carry it on because we don't want you to have access for you to come and hurt me.
I just have to know, though, Maykay, because I said I was in college, so a lot of these things I think went over my head because it's not like you're traveling a lot when you're a college student. But 2, for you to have already been a flight instructor and for you to see these changes and see what's coming, talk to me about, from your perspective, I mean, it's like a night and day as to what it was 24 years ago.
Right. Well, I will tell you the first time I flew after 9/11. So all the planes, all the civilian planes, airliners, were grounded for about 2 to 3 days. After that, the FAA only allowed airliners and commercial operations to fly. I was flying for a company, and that day, and I had to have a flight plan. It had to be an instrument flight plan. We won't get in the weeds with that, but they want to make sure that you are commercial or professional. And I was ramp checked at the airport. My first flight after 9/11, I will tell you, during 9/11, the silence was deafening because I live near an airport, Piedmont Triad International Airport, and it was so quiet because there were no airplanes.
See, those are things
flying.
I never would have known.
Oh my gosh, it was so quiet. And then the first day, airliners were allowed first, and then other commercial operators like myself, ramp checked. So the FAA came up to her and said, ma'am, let me see your pilot certificate. Let me see your medical certificate, your ID. Wanted to make sure that I wasn't just some nutcase trying to go fly and do some harm, even though obviously I wasn't, but nothing is what you think it is, apparently. And he questioned my lady passenger who owned the plane, and she came out and said, what's going on here? And he said, I'm so-and-so at the FAA. I'm just ramp checking May Kay. She's fine. All of her paperwork is in order. Where are you going, May Kay? I'm flying her to Charleston. Everything is in order. My flight plan is for such and such a time. So, and then gradually more and more people were allowed to fly. But that was shocking.
Yeah.
That was shocking.
But did it make you feel good? Because to me, I feel like I know security takes time, but it makes me feel good that you're not having an image in your mind of what you think a terrorist could look like, and you're checking everybody.
It did make me feel good.
Okay.
It's just hard to even imagine such a thing.
Yeah.
It's hard to even imagine.
Would you think to yourself, me? What?
Yeah.
I mean, no, like that's the farthest thing from my mind. But yeah.
But this FAA gentleman was doing his job. Who are you? Where are you going?
Yeah.
Are you a commercial pilot? Let me see your license. Oh, this is your passenger. Who owns the airplane? Oh, you own the airplane. This is your pilot. Where are you going? Why are you going?
Right. So now our current TSA and what it looks like now, 24 years later, and they're still making improvements, just in the last couple of years.
So, all right, I'm going to quiz you.
Okay.
All right. So we don't have to take our shoes off anymore. Praise the Lord. All right. That just changed. They got rid of the shoe removal policy. Do you remember, or did you remember me talking about why we had that in the first place? Why in the world would we have to take our shoes off back in the day?
Because you can slide things within your soul.
Yes.
And people could rip, when you watch movies like Enemy of the State and you see that he rips his shoe off and he's got a sensor in there. There's so many things. It's almost like being strip searched, but you can only get down to so much. Obviously, you don't want somebody to be naked going through TSA.
Right. No, that'd be scary.
But you would think about the clothing, though. Even if you have a jacket on, you have to take your jacket off. There's been times that I just had yoga pants on and like a tank top, and I felt so bare.
Yeah. Yeah. Richard Reed, back in 2001, was a British-raised terrorist. He put a bomb in his shoe. So this was in 2001. It was an American Airlines flight from Paris to Miami. And he had he was going to detonate a bomb that he had rigged in his shoe. While he's on board the flight, they're in the air. Apparently, he's trying to light. It's not funny, forgive me, but thank God it didn't work out. The flight attendants and passengers noticed he's trying to do something to his shoe. The heel of his shoe was trying to light the fuse.
Yeah.
He had a hard time lighting it because he was sweating so bad. It got moisture in there, and they caught him and said, what are you doing? He's now in jail forever and ever and ever. And they came up with, it was actually 5 years later, they had the shoe removal policy so that you can't be doing that.
But why change it now?
I think, we have a new administration.
Okay.
And things are just changing with the new administration. Right. Plus, we have more sophisticated security detectors now. And I think that was the reason that they claimed. I'm going to ask our producer, do we have time for me to talk about the liquids?
Sure.
Okay, so because he's wrapping us up for a break. So I have to tell you about the liquids.
Okay.
So you take in a 1-quart clear plastic bag, little travel size containers. It can't hold more than 3.4 ounces of your perfume or your body lotion. Right. Why?
Because I guess that's the amount that it takes to be able to dilute something.
You're too smart for me.
Okay, well, that's what I was thinking, only because I use saline solution, and I'm like, why is it only this amount? But I assume that's chemically, you need more liquid to be able to dilute something that would set something off. That's my thinking.
I think she saw my notes.
I did not.
Okay, so
is
you're
that right? Okay.
So back in that day, too.
That's also chemistry, right?
See, I know. Who knew? 2001 era, there were terrorists who were plotting. They were making bombs using like 15-ounce soda bottles, so all that liquid. They got thwarted. They didn't get to do that. But the TSA decided, well, if you have a certain amount of liquid, it's not enough to make a bomb. So we're going to let you do that. We're going to let you carry 3.4 ounces in a little travel-size container in only one bag per customer, Alicia. And that's where that came from. So taking your shoes off, although that just went away. And the liquid rule all came really from the 9/11 era.
Yeah.
And after that, you can thank your terrorists for that. All right. Will that rule go away? There's a rumor that maybe with the new administration, they'll make that rule go away. All right. We're going to take a break and we'll be right back.
Okay. So much more to talk about.
Inside the Cockpit continues. Welcome back, everyone, to this special edition of Inside the Cockpit. May K. Beeler here at Queen City News Plus with Alicia Barnes. Alicia, so much to talk about.
It is, and it's a somber day today, being 9/11, 24 years after when the Twin Towers came down. A lot of things have, though, changed, and especially something in the news this week that relates to all this, May.
Right, so it's a secondary cockpit door barrier. Now, let me tell you, after 9/11, they did fortify the cockpit door. They decided from now on it's going to be locked. It was fortified. It had Kevlar, and it was storm-proof and bullet resistant.
Back then.
This was after 9/11.
Okay.
So between 9/11 and now, they fortified the doors. They lock them. They're pretty much storm-proof,
Okay.
bullet resistant. You really can't get in there.
Okay.
But something really important just happened a couple days ago. Southwest Airlines was the first to implement this policy. It is a secondary barrier to block that flight deck door. And it's kind of like a retracting gate or door that they can block off the cockpit, the flight deck, and the lavatory. The reason being, as we know, as human beings, you need to use the restroom. And sometimes that cockpit door is always locked. But sometimes during flight, a pilot, nature calls. Pilot needs to leave the cockpit to go to the lavatory, which is right next to the cockpit. Well, what's to keep somebody from trying to storm the cockpit then when they open that door? So you know what the flight attendants have done until now this new barrier was introduced?
What's that?
Want to guess?
Hide, go down to the bottom level.
Right. They would take the galley cart, the beverage cart, and put it in front of the door. That's a heavy thing. You know, it hurts your elbow and your feet. Ouch.
Yeah.
They would block that. But now we have a secondary gate or door that's retractable. And it's only right now on the Southwest Airlines 737 MAX planes, brand new, and the other airlines are going to follow suit.
Which it sounds good. And just from my perspective, and maybe others out there thinking the same thing, you being a pilot inside and somebody takes over your plane, even though you have that second barrier door that they can't get to you, what if they're threatening to be able to hurt the passengers? Do you stay as a pilot? Hey, look, you know what? I'm locked into this area. My job.
Oh, I'm flying the plane.
You're flying the plane.
We are flying the airplane. Now, the flight crew, our flight attendants, are going to get the help of the passengers.
I got you.
They're going to take those
passengers where they can go.
They're going to take them down.
Having the pilot not being able to take over the flight is what is the most important thing.
Right. We don't want them in the flight deck.
Right.
We don't want them in the cockpit. We're going to fly the plane to safety. That's our job. The flight crew is going to take care of the perpetrators in the back, and really passengers, just like during 9/11,
right,
helped and will take over.
It's just scary. I mean, it's scary to think that we need these kinds of safety, things in place so that it doesn't happen again.
Well, apparently since 2001, according to reports, the an Airline Pilots Association has noted there have been 51 attempts to hijack planes internationally since 2001. And that's why they said we need a secondary barrier. It's not enough just to have it locked, because when we open it to use the restroom, somebody could storm the cockpit. So a lot of changes. Something else you may not know, since 9/11, more flight marshals or air marshals. You don't know what flights they're on, but there are air marshals there. They're disguised. You're not going to know who they are. And some of the pilots are federal flight deck officers.
Wow.
They have a weapon in that cockpit. And not all pilots, but you don't know who they are, so don't you be messing around.
So you definitely feel safer.
Yes. Yeah. So the tragedy of 9/11 still weighs heavy on our hearts, and all the changes, at least we're safer today. And so we're going to wrap up this edition of Inside the Cockpit. I know there's a whole lot more that we can talk about. We're limited in time. So we honor the memories of all those we lost on 9/11. Thanks for joining us. I'm May K. Beeler with Alicia Barnes for Queen City News Plus. We'll see you next time.
Queen City News Plus. Just search Queen City News on your smart TV's app store.